Okay, hello everyone. Today is January the 5th, 2023. The other day, I heard this in my spirit, this word, hyperinflation. So I want to come on here and say a little bit about hyperinflation and what it is, and does it in fact look like our country is on that inevitable road, and to show you that the prediction of hyperinflation is actually in the Bible. And furthermore, to show you that you don't have to wait for the scripted news to come on and tell you that something is happening in our economy. You can use the eyes that God has given you after you have applied the eye salve of repentance that he sells, and applied that to your eyes, then you will have eyes to see. And with those eyes, you will be able to look out into the world that you live in and see what's actually going on. It's not that hard. It's very simple. You are an economist, and you're a better economist than you'll ever see on your television screen, because you have eyes that see, because you're honest, because you're not out reading things that people place in front of you, and you see what's really going on. And number one, you don't have to wait for any expert to tell you anything about your life or this life or how to deal with God, anything. You have everything that you'll ever need on your very knees and in the grace of God. That's number one. So there's no such thing as an expert. And furthermore, economics is not even a science. I want to read a quote to you from the first man ever to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel Prize for economics. I'm going to tell you what he said about it. It's all a bunch of malarkey. Not that there aren't things happening with money, but that it is run by and governed by some laws of structure or principles called, and then they can be distilled into a science and then passed on up through this royal hierarchy to these doctors of economics and Ben Bernankes and Alan Greenspans to tell us lowly peasants what's going to happen to us in the future, as far as, are you going to have a job? Can you afford a house? So we don't have to wait for them. They're telling you what's in their best interest. And they're not telling you what's all that's going on. So the fact of the matter is, the money principles that guide this world are very simple. And Jesus laid it out for us. He is the way, the truth, and the light. And the truth is, economics is not a science. So since it's not a science, there's no experts. And anybody with eyes to see can look out and tell you what's going on. It's about the world of central bankers and what the Lord told us. The love of money is the root of all evil. But what even is money? We don't even know. What even is money? So those are the kinds of things we're going to talk about for a few minutes here. And I'm going to read you this quote, what this man said. Okay, economics is not a science. All right. All right, so this says, Despite being the first American, so he wasn't the first person, but the first American to win the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economics. Okay, so despite being the first American to win the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences, Paul Samuelson famously stated, "Economics has never been a science, and it is even less now than a few years ago. It is my opinion that this statement still holds true today." This is what the writer of this article goes on to say. That it's his or her opinion. The name is Aubrey, so that could be a man's name or a woman's name. So it says this holds even less true today. Economics is not a science. It is what's called a social science. And I'm going to tell you the main problem with the experts that claim to declare something or advise about something in economics. The main weapon that they will throw at you is statistics. Statistics, statistics, statistics. And if that's all that a so-called science has to offer, then it is no science at all. If you know anything about statistics, statistics should be called the science of deceiving people. When I first took a statistics class, or some class I was in, the teacher said this. He said, "Statistics is like a bikini. It's the parts that they don't show you that are the important parts." So, they tell you very little. So you can see a whole lot when a woman is wearing a bikini. But the main things and the important things that you may or may not want to see are the parts that the statistic will not tell you. In other words, you can get a statistic to look like, sound like, make people think anything you want, just based on the way that you present the information. I'm going to give you an example. So, just worthless. Anything that calls itself a science should have something better than statistics and a bunch of numbers that they're adding up and presenting to you that they have to interpret before they even have any meaning. Science should not be left up to an interpretation. So I'm going to give you an example of how meaningless all statistics are. All statistics. If I were to tell you that, and this is something that if you have, any age on you at all, you've heard this. Okay, I think it was dentine. It used to be a type of gum called dentine or Trident or something like that. And they used to say this in their commercial. 4 out of 5 dentists recommend chewing this gum, this particular type of gum. I think it was dentine. Here, let me just look it up. Okay, yeah, that's what it was. Oh, boy. Boy, I tell you, the past is something else. So here was the quote on these commercials. 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum for their patients. Okay, that's what they used to say. But the big part is what they're not telling you. It says, for their patients who chew gum. So this was the 1970s commercial for Trident gum. They came up with this slogan. it says this slogan, Trident came up with this slogan and the idea of 4 out of 5 dentists, which is still widely used today to sell gum and toothpaste. Okay, but what they left out is that dentists do not recommend that people chew gum. It's kind of like if you ask your doctor, what brand of cigarettes do you recommend for your patients to smoke? None. It's a meaningless statistic. It gives you the impression that your dentist would like for you to chew sugarless gum, when chewing gum is not good for people. The repetitive motion of the chewing and other problems with chewing gum. So anyway, anything that's based on statistics, that's worthless. Now, if it's based on something that I can test and measure and come up with the same answer every single time, then we can call that a science. Now, math can be called a science, because no matter how many times I add 2 and put 2 more with it, I come up with 4. And this can be repeated all over the world. Nothing tricky about it until you add in some statistics. All right. So, number 1, economics is not a science, which means that you don't need an expert to tell you anything. And furthermore, you are an expert. I'm sorry. Seems like I got some acid on something here. Try to wipe this off real quick. Okay. Oh, that tasted terrible. Anyway. So, hyperinflation. Now, in 2021, was it 2021? Yes, in 2021, when our government, or it might have been in 2020, let's see, stimulus checks. When did they come out? All right. Were there any stimulus checks in 2020? What a year, 2020. Okay, in March of 2020, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES, provided economic impact payments of up to $1,200 per adult for eligible individuals and $500 per qualifying child under age 17. Okay. Then in 2021, I didn't even know about this doggone stimulus payment from 2021 until the thing was in my checking account. I didn't even know there was any talk of it. Okay. The American Rescue Plan. See how these things sound so great? The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, enacted in early March 2021, provided economic impact payments of up to $1,400 for eligible individuals or $2,800 for married couples filing jointly, plus $1,400 for each qualifying dependent child. Okay, so now you guys remember that. So me, as an individual, received $1,400. Just bam, there it was in my checking account. For married couples, imagine you're married. We'll say you got 3 kids, and you get $3,000, $4,200, $7,000. A man, a wife, and 3 kids, $7,000 just bam, plopped in your lap. And if you're single, you're $1,400 and plus your 2, 3 kids, however many. Now, what happened was immediately, that very week, immediately, as those checks began to hit people's accounts, the spending began. And also immediately, prices began to rise. You saw it immediately. It was noticeable. You're walking through Target. People begin to spend those stimulus checks. And within 2 to 3 days, the prices were significantly increased in order to absorb that extra money. They knew this is free money. These people just got free money. And we're going to be real loose with it. It's not going to be as if you just worked, 7 days in a row to get this money, or went digging ditches to get this money. This money is not going to have the same value to people as if they had worked and earned it in a paycheck. This was something unexpected, just bam, dropped in their lap, and they're going to spend it more freely and with less discretion than they otherwise would. So prices being a little bit more expensive is not going to deter people when they have extra money. So no kidding. The day, within a couple of days of that money being put in people's accounts, people were just recklessly spending. People were just out buying any and everything that they never would have bought in any other case. And so that just lends itself to higher prices. It's kind of like if you go to a baseball game. Now, normally in your right mind, you would not pay $5 for one hot dog. But somehow at the baseball game, in the baseball arena, we have an atmosphere of, you only live once. Let's have a good time here at the park today. Oh, devil may care. Let's buy this $5 bag of popcorn. Let's buy it. We're at the movies. That's another place where we do this, where we will pay for one soda what you could have got 3 2-liters for. But you only live once. Here we are at the movies. Let's go ahead and do it. We're feeling real generous. So you multiply that times the whole country for people all this extra money to spend. That's where the inflation really began to take off towards the realm of hyperinflation. And just to prove to you that you are an economist, we're going to just talk about this a little bit more. The only truth regarding economics that there is, and because there's no other truth underlying it, it cannot be called a science. But the only truth regarding money that we can hold on to is that the love of money is the root of all evil. And the other thing that we can say about money, that I can say this about money because the Lord spoke it to me or showed it to me in a dream, that money is not real. Money is not real. So if we can unpack those couple of ideas and walk away having learned something about a very shadowy aspect of our lives yet it plays a part in every day of our lives, money, and that it's something that's so very little understood. So as soon as all of that stimulus money, okay, and all of that CARES money, when what we remember, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the government, see, that was just one part of the CARES Act, was those little crumbs that were thrown to the American people. But our government spent so much money, and they just bought us off with $1,200. And we were complicit in the destruction of our own economy, which we will see very soon in the form of hyperinflation. Right now, we're experiencing inflation, where every single time you go to the store, things cost more. Things cost significantly more here at the end of the year than they did at the beginning of the year. How we watched gas prices just rise and go out of control. And even though now they're over $3, we're still not complaining, because they were over $4 and over $5 in some parts of the country and more. But because they're not at their peak, we're kind of accepting it, even though they cost $1 more than it did before. So let's look at this CARES Act. So I'm putting in, how much did the CARES Act spend? Okay. Boy. So I guess it's still going on. This is how much was spent so far in response to COVID-19. This is how much was spent so far. $14.5 trillion. And this is usspending.gov. This is a government website. And I'm trying to see a date on this information. I don't see any date on this information. Because this could be old. And it's still steady spending. All right, so as far as I can see here, $4.5 trillion. $4.5 trillion. Oh, and this is since September 30th of last year. September 30th of last year. All right. So from March of 2020, good grief. From March of 2020 until September, so that's roughly 2.5 years, they managed to spend $4.5 trillion. $4.5 trillion. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see. The clock of the U.S. debt. I don't even know what this is. So that's 100,000, 100 million, 100 billion. So $31 trillion. $31 trillion. All right. Let's see. We have 4.5 divided by 30. So we decided that we needed to add 14.5% to all of the money that Americans owe, or that America owes. Let's see. Now, this is debt. We're going to see what was the debt when Obama took office. All right. Oh my gosh. God help us. All right. What's the best way to determine how much each president has contributed to our nation's $31 trillion debt? All right. Let's see. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. President Roosevelt added the largest percentage increase to the national debt, although he only added $236 billion. This was an increase of about 1,048% from the $22.5 billion debt left by Herbert Hoover before him. So this man multiplied the country's debt in the 12 years that he was president. He multiplied the country's debt by 10 times. 10 times. All right. Now let's unpack that and translate it. When you say that a man multiplied the debt of the United States, or that a president multiplied, what you're saying is that this president, on behalf of you and me and every citizen of this country, borrowed money from central bankers, borrowed money from the synagogue of Satan, enslaved Americans, citizens, your neighbor, you, me. When you get paid this week or next week or whenever you get paid, and you see that big old chunk of your money, that when you add up your hourly rate, okay, I make so much an hour, I work so many hours, but I add that up, but I don't get that amount. I don't get that. Okay, that part that's cut off and you just don't never see it, that's where that's going. To pay back the people that they borrowed this money from. Now, the thing that is so disgusting about it is that there is no need for a government to borrow money. There is absolutely zero need for them to borrow money. This is the whole crux of the matter right here. This is why money is not real. All you need, if you even need this, but if you're going to say that you need money, all right, you need a way for people to exchange things that they have or time that they spend doing something. You need a way for them to exchange that with someone else who has something to give or another skill that they want to sell to the marketplace. Now, let's say I need eggs, but I have an excess of milk. I have a cow. My cow made more milk than I can drink, and I want to trade with someone because I want eggs, but I don't have chickens, but I have cows. So I need to find that one person who has eggs and needs milk. So to bypass that difficulty, or maybe they don't have enough eggs to make up for the whole amount of milk that I want to sell. So to make up for that, there is money. Now I can trade my milk for money. And then I can use the money to go and buy the eggs. Now, money is just any old random thing that you decide. Let's say we decide this is going to be our money. Now, I'm willing to take my milk and give it to someone, and they give me this. Now, what I have to trust is that when I go to the person who has the eggs and I give them this, they're not going to say, what in the world is that? I don't want that. What am I going to do with this? I'm not giving you my eggs. What is that? I don't want that. Then we have a problem. Now, business and commerce is going to come to a screeching halt because we cannot agree to swap items because I don't have anything they want. But you have this thing called legal tender. Let's look up the exact definition of legal tender. All right, legal tender. Matter of fact, let's just look up tender. Tender? Not that. There must be more definitions. Wow. Showing gentleness and concern or sympathy. Solicitous of, concerned for, solicitous. I don't know what that word was. Easy to chew, not tough. No thing that has anything to do with money. But when we put legal in front of it, legal tender, it means is a form of money that courts of law are required to recognize as satisfactory payment for any monetary debt. Legal tender. I still don't see how it has anything to do with the word tender, but we'll let that go. So legal tender. If I get a court, the lawmakers of the land, to say that this is legal tender, that this is something that must be accepted. See, must be accepted. And even on the dollars, it says, what does it say on the dollar? This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Okay? And the dollar is also, it is also this thing called a Federal Reserve note. Okay? The dollar face. Okay. Federal Reserve note. I'm looking at a $100 bill. It says Federal Reserve note. And so you look at a $1 bill. They're Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve note says it right there on the top. Federal Reserve note. Now, what is a note? A note is an IOU. It's an IOU. So, the Federal Reserve notes could be redeemed silver certificate. Okay. All right. Okay. This is on the website Investopedia. A silver certificate dollar bill represents a unique time in American history. It was a type of legal tender that was issued by the federal government in the late 1800s. As the name suggests, the holder of the certificate could redeem it for a certain amount of silver. One certificate allowed investors to hold silver without having to buy the precious metal itself. These certificates no longer carry monetary value as an exchange for silver, yet they are still legal tender at their face value. In the market, silver certificates are often worth more than their face value. All right. So, when these things were issued by the United States, the silver certificate, it was kind of like a bearer bond. And a bearer bond is the bearer, like I say, I'm the bearer of bad news. I'm the one who is bringing bad news. So if I hold it and I'm bringing it to you. So the bearer, the one who holds this note, this silver certificate, can take this certificate to a government office and say, I would like to receive the silver that this certificate represents. So when you get your car title is a certificate. It's saying that you own this vehicle. It represents your ownership of this vehicle. And you don't own this vehicle without that title. You can't get plates for it. You can't sell it. You can't do anything with it. I sold my uncle a car that I got from someone, that they bought from someone, and that person that I bought it from failed to get the title from the person that they paid $5,000 for this car to. The person never gave them the title. Therefore, they never gave the title to me. Therefore, I could not give the title to my uncle. So he bought a car for one of his daughters that he could never get a license plate for. Nothing. He could never register it in his name. Thankfully, it was only $500, so he didn't get on my case too bad, but I could not get the title for him. So anyway, so that's what it is. It represents the car. The car is no good without the title. You'd just be arrested for having someone else's car. It's not your car unless you have the title. And whoever has the title, you could take that title to the police and say, listen, this is my car and it's in her driveway. And the police will be like, look, she's got the certificate. Give her the car. And that's the way it would go. So that's the way silver certificates were. They look like dollars, except they have blue writing on them. And if you had that certificate, it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was like the title to a car. It was the title for you to have a certain amount of silver. You can go and get it. You could go exchange it for that amount of silver. So, now, also, the gold standard was the same way. The dollar, the Federal Reserve note, was also exchangeable for a certain amount of gold. So it wasn't, well, it still was a worthless piece of paper. But you could at least take that worthless piece of paper and exchange it for something that was actually real. An amount of gold or an amount of silver. Now, what they did was this act was enacted, okay? That the Federal Reserve note, instead of the United States saying, we are going to create something that our citizens can use as legal tender so that they can exchange goods and services with each other on an equal basis and accurately keep account of who owes who what. And they'll just hold these, whatever we decide is going to be, whether it's these little silver rings or, hair clips, whatever. We're going to say this is going to be what we're going to use for money. Now, instead of our government doing that, what they decided to do in the Federal Reserve Act, and at other times during our history, but most recently and famously and deadly was in the Federal Reserve Act. This was in 1913. And what they decided to do, in order for our citizens, this is what they were saying, in order for our citizens to exchange goods and services with each other and to keep track and accounting of all these things, we are going to borrow money. No, we're not even going to borrow money because the money's not even real. What we're going to do, now follow this because it's just a hocus pocus like none other. What we're going to do is we're going to take these people who paid us off. These people paid us off to sign an agreement to allow them to guarantee our money. Now, going back to the example of when I had my milk to sell and say the government says, hey, go ahead and accept this ring, okay? And if you exchange your milk for those eggs, or you exchange your milk for this ring right here, and you're not getting anything for it. I really want eggs. I can't eat this. I really want eggs. So the government says, hey, listen, take this ring in exchange for your milk. And if anything happens, I will give you silver for what you exchanged your milk for. Or like I say, hey, I'm giving this guy milk and he's giving me, a worthless piece of paper. I don't want that. And the government says, no, go ahead and take it. It's not a worthless piece of paper. It's a certificate. It's a silver certificate. If you have that certificate, we'll give you silver. So you've got nothing to lose. Hold on to that silver certificate. And the next person who you want eggs from, go and take it and give it to them for the eggs. And why should they accept that? Well, because it's not really a piece of paper. It's a silver certificate. You won't be lost. No, I'm giving you something real, eggs. And you're trying to give me nothing. And the government says, no, it's not nothing. It's really a silver certificate. Here, bring it here. I'll give you silver for it. See, you didn't exchange your milk for nothing. You didn't exchange your eggs for nothing. You exchanged it for a pile of silver. See? And you say, oh, okay. Yeah. And over time, people began to trust that. Fine. It's okay that I'm giving you something of real value and you're giving me paper because our government is going to guarantee and exchange this certificate for silver or gold in that case. So then at some point, as you just read there, as people gain confidence in the dollar, in the Federal Reserve note, as people gain confidence in the Federal Reserve note, they just forgot about the fact that they're trading their goods, their time, their services, their work, their land, anything they have that they want to give to someone else or get something from someone else for. They forgot that they're exchanging it for nothing. And they're putting their trust, because it's written right there on there, in God we trust. And this is their God. Because remember, Jesus said, no man can serve two masters. You can't serve God and mammon, which is money. So it's pretty clear. So they put trust in this thing. And then our system of money and markets and goods and labor and services that we provide and we receive from other people, our economy is all based on trust in the dollar, in the Federal Reserve note. So instead of us as a government, instead of our government just saying, like I said, like I started to say, I am going to just print a piece of paper. I'm going to print a note. I'm going to print a note that my citizens can use and that they can trust in, that if this person rips them off, I will back it up. I'll put my name, U.S. government, on there. And the government will see to it that whoever ripped me off pays me my money, or gives me back my property, or gives me what it was worth. You're going to guarantee that I'm not going to get stuck holding a worthless piece of paper as we are exchanging things with each other. And the placeholder for the things that we exchange with each other is a note. Now, the problem is, who writes the note? In one theory, the government itself we the people, write our own note as the placeholder as we pass goods and services around amongst ourselves. But what happened in 1913 was some bankers got together, some rich people got together, some people, whatever. Money's not real, so it's hard to even call them rich, whatever. Some influential people. The money came from the law that they wrote. They generated this money. They just made it. They wrote a law that they would become the issuers of the notes instead of the government, who would just make these notes and say, hey, people, have at it. Exchange with each other and let this be the placeholder, the legal tender. So what the Federal Reserve did in the form of the Federal Reserve Act, which they wrangled and did all kinds of tricks and backflips. You think remember the fight over Obamacare? You think that was bad. You should have seen the tussle to create the Federal Reserve Act. That thing was fought tooth and nail. But then on one session of Congress, right before Christmas, the Christmas let out, they worked through the night and pushed this bill through when nobody was watching. Woodrow Wilson signed it into law. No doubt the beneficiary of a huge bribe. So what they did was say, okay, Federal Reserve, okay, private bank, Federal Reserve, a organization just like any other business that has shareholders, made a contract in the form of the Federal Reserve Act to supply the notes that the American people would use to circulate goods and services among themselves, which is in fact our economy. So, what's so bad about that? Well, it's the difference between the government just saying, hey, we'll write our own notes, use these. But when they do it from the Federal Reserve, they agreed that the notes that the Federal Reserve would write for them would be borrowed. We, instead of doing it ourselves, I will pay them to do it. I will pay the Federal Reserve to make the certificates for us. Instead of our making our own certificates, our own legal tender, we will pay them to do it. And let me tell you what that's like. That's like, say I have a man, I'm a wife, and I have a man who's my husband. And I have a kitchen in my house. I have a stove, a refrigerator, pots and pans. And I'm going to make breakfast for my family every morning. Instead of me going into my kitchen and pulling out the flour and the butter and making some biscuits, going in the refrigerator, getting some eggs, some bacon, pull down my own plates, I make a contract with the neighbors that I will pay them $100 a morning to come and make breakfast at their house and then bring it over to my house. Now, not only will I pay them to do this, I will borrow it at interest. I will borrow it with interest. Now, what is so heinous about this is just that it is just what I said. Instead of doing that for ourselves, these government people allowed themselves to be paid off by this separate and outside organization. It is not a part of the United States government. It is not governed by the United States government. It is not answerable to the United States government. And it has not been audited by the United States government. You can be audited by the United States government, but the Federal Reserve cannot. It has not ever been audited, and it cannot ever be audited. So they decided to not only pay this organization to print their certificates, but to borrow it with interest. Not only will I pay you to do it, but I'll pay you interest on doing it. So if any of you have ever had a bad car deal, had a bad interest rate on a car loan, say your car note is $600, and every month $450 of that $600 pays the interest. Let's see what that looks like. I don't know if this is going to come out backwards. Let's say I'm going to pay for my car for 5 years. And so that's 60 months. And I'm going to pay, I borrowed $20,000 to buy this car. So I borrowed $20,000 and I agree to pay $600 a month because of my interest rate. So I have a bad interest rate, 15%, which can easily happen these days. So I'm paying $600 a month. These are not real numbers. I could look up and get some real numbers. Let's get some real numbers. Auto loan calculator. Auto loan. I'm almost done. Auto loan calculator. All right. All right. Here we go. I'm going to buy a $20,000 car. Buy a nice used car for $20,000. 60 months. I got bad credit, so 14% interest rate. I'm kind of broke, so I'm only putting $1,500 down. I don't have a trade-in, and I live in California. All right. So let's calculate. Now. All right. Now I'm going to do a zero down payment. Let's do a zero down payment. So $20,000. My monthly car note will be what? My monthly car note is going to be total of 60 payments. All right. My total payment is 282294 divided by 60. $28,234 divided by 60 months. So I'm paying $470 a month for my car. Now you're saying, whoa, wait a minute. $470 multiplied by 60 months, that's not $20,000. That's $28,000. Yeah, it's $28,000 because of interest. Now let's borrow even more money. Let's borrow $50,000. Let's borrow $75,000. No, let's borrow $100,000. There we go. $100,000. Now. Yeah. This is what I like about it, guys. This is what I like about it. The bigger the numbers get, the more interest you owe. Okay. I borrowed $100,000, but I'm going to pay back I borrowed $100,000. I'm going to pay back $148,000. All right, now let's borrow even more money. I don't know how big this thing will let me go. Let's borrow $500,000. Okay. If I borrow $500,000, 14% interest. Now let's make the interest rate worse. Let's see. What's the worst auto loan rate right now? All right. 25%. Okay. Let's put 25% in here. We're getting off easy with 14%. 25%. And let's calculate. Let's go back to our $20,000 car now. All right, calculate. All right. Now, I'm borrowing $20,000 for 5 years at 25% interest. And get my calculator back. 20,000 times 0.25. Now you would think 25% of 20,000 is $5,000. No, that's not how much interest you're going to pay. You're going to pay $15,221 because of this creative little invention called compounding interest. So I'm telling you, 25% interest rate. But it's really not a 25% interest rate. It's actually It's actually 76% interest. If you're just going to multiply it out the way you would normally think, well, it's 25%. No. You're actually going to pay 76% interest. That's how they do it. You borrow $20,000 and you're going to pay them $15,221,059 in interest and the $20,000 for a total of $36,921. All right. So that's how deadly interest is. So knowing how horrible interest is, why in the world would any honest government choose to borrow their legal tender versus to just issue it themselves? Well, they sold out the American people in that act. Also, at that same time, they created the income tax. I think it's called the Income Tax Act or something. Income Tax Act. Yep, 1913, same time as the Federal Reserve Act. The Income Tax Act is the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatsoever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. So the federal government now has given themselves the power to raise money directly from the people based on their industry, the industry of the individual, their income. And I also want to throw something else out there. If you think you're going to get around what they're going to do as the quality of food diminishes and people are unable to get healthy food or enough food, and they try to grow their own food, that statement right there, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on income from whatsoever source derived. Say you're growing your own food. You know what they're going to do? What they always did throughout history, before there was money as such. Come and take a portion of your crops as your taxes. We are under a beast. The most terrible thing that has ever governed mankind is our government right now. And it's just ramping up. So they gave themselves also, with the ability or with the decision to borrow. It just doesn't make sense. At the same time that I agree, instead of to cook breakfast in my own kitchen, I allow my neighbor, say I'm trying to cheat my husband, I allow my neighbor to talk me into, hey, listen, I'm going to pay you off. I'm going to give you $15,000. Just come over here. Your husband's going to be the one paying for it anyway. Come over here at $100 a week and make breakfast over here. And you're going to pay interest on it, but don't worry about it. It's not going to cost you anything. We're going to get it from the people. We're going to get it from your husband. I also have this Income Tax Act. So they did those two things at the same time. Agreed to borrow from these people the certificates. Instead of printing my own, I'm going to borrow this at face value from a private group of people. I'm going to pay them interest that's going to come from my newly created ability to tax the American people. And this was the great betrayal that was perpetrated on the American people in 1913 by our government. And soon after doing this, those silver certificates and the ability to trade in your money for gold went away. The reason for me to trust you taking what I work hard for and giving it away Oh my goodness. I didn't know I had that on me. Sorry. That's terrible. Excuse me for a moment. That looks terrible. There we go. There we are. It'll dry. So that's what happened. You see, it's just a whole bunch of hocus pocus. Now our government, instead of just handing out notes of their own, they contracted out the printing of our money to a private source and agreed to pay interest to do it. And now we have borrowed so much money that it can never, ever, ever, ever be repaid. You see how the interest adds up? What I just showed you with the car example? It can never be repaid. Just the interest alone. How much, and on that note, as I make that connection, the money that was put out in the stimulus, that $4.5 trillion that the government gave away, was all borrowed in that same exact way that they set up in the Federal Reserve Act. The goal of this act was to, first of all, make some people incredibly rich. And the second was to enslave every nation to the international bankers, which are the owners of the central bank of the United States, which is called the Federal Reserve, the central bank of Canada, the central bank of every nation, and nations that have been embroiled in war and conflict throughout the 20th century and into the 21st century are nations that refuse to establish a central bank. So all the wars, all the conflicts are all about getting everyone enslaved to the international bankers to do something that makes absolutely no sense on any plane, to borrow your paper money into existence when you can just print it yourself. So all that money that they spent was all borrowed. They said, hey, yeah, print that up for me. Send that over. Yeah, I'll give you interest for it. So just makes no sense. The paper, they want to borrow the paper at interest. They haven't borrowed your work at interest. I didn't just make up my work. I actually had to physically go there and work. I had to actually spend time. I had to actually produce something. My work can't just come out of thin air. But the paper can come out of thin air. Remember, we only need the paper to hold a place as we pass around real goods and services. Now suddenly this paper that's not real, that we didn't need in the first place, is costing all of us so much of our real purchasing power in taxes to go to the federal government to pay back the central bankers for a certificate that they could have printed themselves for free. Now, that's lesson number 1 about our economy. Lesson number 2, which is the reason for inflation and then what's coming next, hyperinflation, is that while you and I are doing real actual things for each other, buying and selling real things from each other, let's simplify our economy and say that all there are soda pops. There's nothing that we buy or sell except for soda pop. We don't need any food. We don't need anything. This is just a make-believe place. And all we sell is soda pop. So I'm going to make 4 bottles of soda pop. And we have 2 citizens. Okay? Now, these 2 citizens have been, hopefully you can see that. Let's see. Okay. These two citizens have been given by the federal government eight Federal Reserve notes that they paid to borrow from the Federal Reserve. So your government goes over to the Federal Reserve, makes an agreement with them for interest, get some pieces of paper from the Federal Reserve. So they take and give these pieces of paper that they're going to borrow with interest, and you're going to pay it back. You're the only one paying it back. They're not doing anything. So we have 8 Federal Reserve notes. 4 for person A and 4 for person B. All right. Now, here's person C over here, and he sells soda pop. Now, we each have $4, right? And this is all the soda pop that there is this week. There's no more soda pop. And we both want it. So here comes the government making a stimulus. Hey, Federal Reserve, I want to order up at interest 8 more worthless pieces of paper that I'm going to further enslave and indebt these people to you. I'm just going to spend them. I want to heat up the economy. I want to stimulate things. I want to get them buying stuff. So I'm just going to give it to them. Okay. So now instead of 4, they each have 8 now. The government, he borrowed up 4 more. He borrowed up 8 more, and he just gave us a stimulus package. He just gave each person 8 more. 4 more. Okay. So now they have 8. So what are they going to do? All they ever buy is soda pop. But they just did this. They just one day just decided to send this out. Person C, he doesn't have any more soda pop. This is all the soda pop he has to sell. So since these 2 guys want the soda pop, now instead of the soda pop costing $1 a piece, now he can pay $2 a piece and get all the soda pop from this guy. Now he has it all. He can't buy any because it's just supply and demand. And then we say, oh, the economy's bad. Look, he wants soda pop. He can't get any. Oh, well, stimulate more. Stimulate some more. Okay, get some more. Now what happens? I'm going to give him 8 more. He goes over here. Hey, Federal Reserve, the economy's bad. Give me 8 more. Okay, so now 8 more. Now they each have 12. Now they each have 12. Except he only has, so he has 20 now. This guy has 20. He has 20 because he just got 8 more. And he didn't spend his other one. But this guy spent his, so all he has is 12. So now, instead of a total of $16 in existence, we have $32 in existence now. We have $32 in existence. But still, this guy, he can only make so much soda pop. So he made 4, in that time he made 4 more. So now we have $32 instead of a total of $8 or $16 chasing these same 4 bottles. We have $32. So now they can cost $8 a piece. And this is inflation. Because merely by printing money, especially recklessly like we're doing, just dropping it in people's bank account, you are not increasing the goods that are to be sold. That does not just happen instantly because you gave everybody $4. It takes time, it takes planning to produce goods, but it takes nothing to just drop the digits in people's bank accounts. So these people immediately begin spending. But the amount of goods does not immediately go up. But what does go up is the amount of money that they're able to pay for the goods. Which is why when everybody got $1,400, $4,800, $7,000 just dropped into their bank accounts, they ran out to Target. Target didn't instantly get more stuff to sell to the people. But they could up the prices. The supply is the same. The demand has now increased because the people have more money. And the price goes by supply and demand. When supply is low, demand is high, you can charge more. When supply is high and the demand is low, the price will go down to try to get people to buy it. All right. So just like wrapping paper, they got a whole bunch of wrapping paper at the end of the year because they ordered up all this wrapping paper for people to wrap Christmas presents. And at the end of the year, there's no demand. Nobody's buying wrapping paper at the end of the year like they were before. So what happens? The wrapping paper goes on sale. The price goes down because the demand went down and the supply is high. Okay, I hope that makes sense. This is why you started with the inflation. So now what's coming next after inflation is hyperinflation. So now, the other thing about economies is that there's ways that you can foolishly invest in an economy. And then there are ways that you can receive money and do wise things with the money. And you need not make the economy any more complicated than what goes on in your own house. If you have a husband and a wife team, and the husband gets money, he works and he gets some money, or he has an inheritance, Depending on how you spend that money, you can either enhance the wealth of that family, or you can degrade the wealth of that family by the money that you get in. If each family, say you have two families, and they get this money, they get this extra money, this guy right here goes out and buys some seed. He takes that seed, puts it in his backyard, and grows corn. And at the end of the year, he has 100 times more than what he started with, because he produced something with what he was stimulated with. This guy right here went to the racetrack. He was trying to do the same thing. He was trying to get 100 times for his money, but he did it in a very foolish way. He went to the racetrack. He bet on a horse. Let's say the horse won. Let's say he did get 100 times more for his money too, because the horse he bet on won. But to contribute to the overall well-being and economy, which is something called gross domestic product, the total amount of things that the residents that live in this place produce, that's your domestic product. That's what you produce. When you're going out to the horse races and spending the same amount of money that this guy got, this guy at the end of it is going to add 100 bushels of corn to the gross domestic product that did not exist before. He is going to benefit the whole entire system and cause it to grow and to flourish and to increase the well-being and the standard of living for everyone there. This guy who ran out and gave his money to the mafia guys that ran the horse races, he has not added anything to the health of the economy. Now let's say take it back, and this is two families. This guy, he gets $100 bonus at his job. This guy gets $100 bonus at his job, or you can call it a government stimulus or whatever they got, or loan from the government or whatever. He gets his 100, and he goes out and he buys a plow. And he uses that plow to make another 100 acres of farmable land on his space, on his property. This guy goes out and buys a Lamborghini. This guy has enriched his family by all of the food that he will be able to grow and can, and he has increased the security of his family. This guy did not invest as wisely as this guy, and therefore he did not add to the overall health of his family's economy. So that's what happens when you just dump stimulus money into your population. People are not, he did a very considered and wise purchase. What will I do with this that will benefit my family and cause us to increase as time moves on? What will I do to consume this? This guy consumed it conspicuously. He went and bought a 700, it probably costs more now because of inflation, but there was a $750 hamburger that had edible gold on it. $750. Now that's a waste. So that's what happens when you just dump stimulus money. It gets wasted. It does not produce productive activity to your gross national product, your GDP. Your GDP, gross domestic product. So then the bigger your gross domestic product is, the more things that there are for the Americans to choose from. Not only are there soda pops, but there's the corn that this guy grew. Let's say that this guy was not foolish and he bought some equipment to make shoes. He bought all the equipment that he needed to make shoes. And now he's making shoes. Now everybody benefits from that, having that to buy. But when you go to the stores and the grocery stores and there's empty places where there used to be things, this is the sign of a poor country, a country that is being impoverished. And that's where we are. So now where does hyperinflation enter in? Hyperinflation is when this is done just in a crazy amount. The government just starts printing. The government's not printing money. They're borrowing money from the Federal Reserve at interest for you to pay back. And they say, give us a lot. Yeah, we want to just give it, just dump it. We're going to just spend it as foolishly as we want to. There was at my job. Now, I wasn't a part of this. This was before I was a full-time employee and eligible for any of this. During the COVID money, if you would come in and pick up a shift, they used government funds. The government was just dumping all this CARES Act money. They would pay you, and it depended. It would vary from time to time. $500, $700, up to the largest I saw was $1,500 on top of your regular pay to cover one shift. And this was all by the government, covering the emergency. The emergency. Now that was a waste. That money did not get spent in wise and considered ways that would grow the gross domestic product. Just wasteful. So the more money you dump, now these two guys who are only buying the same amount of soda pop, the same 4 soda pops, now they have more money. The only thing that serves to do is increase the price of soda pop because nothing is being produced on the other end of that. You're just dumping made up, created money into the system. And the only thing that can go up is the price because these things are not being made. You don't instantly make things. You don't instantly know what people need or what people are going to buy. The market has to be balanced. You have to have supply and demand, and they have to match with each other. They have to move together and match with each other. If you just artificially start dumping this in here, the only thing you're going to do is raise prices. Now, once prices start going up, this is where hyperinflation comes in. Now, I want you to, if you're still curious about hyperinflation, look up, this happened in Zimbabwe. I think it was in 2006 or 2008. It happened and is currently still going on in Nicaragua, which was communist. This is what happens in communist countries as well. So what happens is the government has to pay back that money that they borrowed with the interest. We as a country are now in the situation where, let's see, what is the current interest payment on the U.S. national debt? Now that's just the interest, remember? Not paying it down at all. All right, this is from July 8th, 2022. This is from a website called the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. So why does it matter what the government is putting all these programs on? And the reason why it matters is because I'm going over to the neighbor's house and I'm paying them to use their kitchen when I have my own. And I'm borrowing the money at interest. All right. So how much does the federal government spend on interest? The roughly $400 billion the federal government is projected to spend on the net interest payment in fiscal year 2022 is more than it is expected to spend on veterans programs. So $400 billion. Okay? On the interest, $400 billion. There is interest cost exceeds spending on other programs. Higher education, $69 billion. Housing, $78 billion. Elementary, secondary, and vocational education, $129 billion. Transportation, $130 billion. All of this is all spent wastefully. Civilian and military retirement, $133 billion. Social Security disability insurance, $142 billion. All this stuff wasteful. Food and nutrition services, $203 billion. Veteran programs, $269 billion. $399 billion. All right. Looking further, by fiscal year 2032, we don't know if we'll get that far, interest costs $1.2 trillion are projected to be larger than federal spending on Medicaid. Okay. Let's see. Now, see, all these are statistics. Again, the things that economics shows you in the way of statistics are less revealing than a bikini. So it's the things they don't tell you that are relevant. So this would be a question that we would need to know. What is the federal government spending on interest a year? So we found out $400 billion. All right. What is the current income of the U.S. government? The U.S. government has collected $570 billion. All right. This is not helpful. How much did the government take in? How much did the federal government take in 2022? All right. So they spent $6.27 trillion. Okay. Now, that was a lot of money. But where the deficit comes in is the difference between what they took in and what they actually spent. So when they spend more, just like with you at your house, when you spend more than what you take in, that's where we get the national debt from. That's where we get the national debt from. And now the debt that we have and just the interest alone guarantees that it can never ever be paid back. So like I was saying about hyperinflation, what happens with hyperinflation is the government, in being able to pay, see, we actually make payments. They actually make payments to the Federal Reserve. Since they can't pay back the money through their deficit spending. Their deficit spending is when you spend more than you take in, but yet you keep spending. So the interest payments on what they were not, on what they spent that they didn't take in, the interest payments, since they don't even have enough money to pay for the stuff that they already bought this year, they're borrowing it. So just like on a credit card, you don't pay off the credit card, you pay the interest. That's what the government has to do, just like everybody else. So now when they do that, they also borrow the money to do that. So you borrow the money to pay your interest rate. So when a country gets into that situation where they don't even have enough money to pay their interest, then they begin to borrow money to pay the interest, if that makes sense. So they're borrowing money from the Federal Reserve to pay back the interest on what they already borrowed from the Federal Reserve. And so that's when you get the government printing press. So you have, like I talked about, the gross domestic product. I need to see what I'm doing here. I'm almost done. And this is going to be about the best I can do. So you have the gross domestic product. That's all the things that the people produce. Now, when a government spends more than what it takes in, and when a government creates more money than what the gross domestic product is, remember, they're creating all this money and they're just passing it out through loans and government programs and welfare programs, tax rebates, tax abatements, all that. The government is spending money into the economy. The people pick up the money and they start to try to buy things. But because the government just, like I said, they just put this money out there. It didn't have anything to do with the producer. So he hasn't produced any more goods. There's just more money chasing the same amount of things, which causes the price of the things to go up. Now, then prices start going up so quickly, like they are right now. Prices start going up so quickly that people will hurry up and buy things because they know the price will be more later. And when that happens, that leads to shortages of things. And that leads to people being willing that increases the demand for those things. Remember, supply and demand. Supply is low, demand is higher than supply, price goes up. And then you just get in this vicious cycle. So I had a dream about wheat prices and they went up like 1,000%. I'll link the video if it's on my channel. It might have been on the channel that was deleted. But the wheat prices went up 1,000%. And I wrote, because of storage. But then when I was reading it, I was like, no, I must have meant to say shortage. But when I wrote it down in the beginning, I wrote storage. So people just go crazy buying things because they know tomorrow it will cost more. Their wages are not going up. Nothing more is being made, but the government is just printing money to pay its debts. It has obligations that it has, but it doesn't have the income because it gets income from the gross domestic product. The things that people make, they created the ability to tax the people off the things that they make and sell and buy. Every week they get us coming and going. You sell, you buy, you make, whatever. You inherit, however you get it. They want a piece of it. But after they've taken all that from you and they're still spending more in debt repayment, interest payments, the government is spending all this in interest payments and plus all of these federal programs that they're funding and corruption and all of it. When after all that they've taken from you and they still cannot balance this thing to make it equal with what they're taking in, match what they're spending, then they spend it anyway. They have just created that money out of nothing. And there's nothing in the gross domestic product to match it or balance it out. So what happens is you have more and more money that's just been created chasing the same amount of production. And because they're taking so much from the people, it actually decreases production. And you get into this vicious cycle where prices are doubling and tripling in a month. And that's hyperinflation. And like I said, look up Zimbabwe, and there have been plenty of places around the world where this has happened. And it's all been triggered by reckless government spending, them spending what they haven't taken in. And just ignoring the fact that they haven't taken it in, and then they just spend it anyway. Which really, like we said, entails just going to the Federal Reserve and saying, hey, print us some pieces of paper and we'll pay you interest. That's all I got to say. God bless you guys.